Well, hello, creatives, community, kind folks, collegiates, classmates, everyone. Hello, thank you for joining me on RPG with DBJ. Today is Future Friday, and we are ending our deep dive into reskinning. And all week we talked about reskinning everything from statistics and spell abilities and class features and monsters and the environment and all kinds of things. And basically being a major tool in our toolbox when it comes to tabletop RPGs. And this today, Future Friday, we tend to this is a very generalized because we dump everything from modern day to post-apocalyptic to near future cyberpunk, transhumanism, intergalactic empires, and anything that's from our modern day off spreading off into the far future. And we like to talk about that as it relates to our tabletop RPG games. And we even add in things like technologically advanced, primitive, medieval gaming as well. We'll hit on that too. But essentially, essentially that's how we roll in our discussions. And got to point out that if you prefer to absorb this channel in its audio form, and you maybe it uses a lot of your data, or you feel like the audio might be better, if you are in Discord, please go over to Fantasy Grounds College and join their Discord. On the left, just slide down to the bottom, down into the boiler room, and join the DBJ chat right there, because we are simulcasting. I like that, simulcast. Anyway, let's talk about Future Friday. And I had some ideas, wasn't sure where we can go with this. So I'll start off small with the Future Friday business. I've heard one of the problems I heard, and of course, this is in relation to reskinning, repurposing, reusing, um, renaming things in our tabletop RPGs. One of the things that I've heard as a slight complaint about running modern day into far future games for some people, as opposed to your classic medieval light games, is that as a game master or game master, dungeon master, storyteller, what have you, that some people have a problem keeping track of all the technology. Uh, for example, in our own modern day world, we have ourselves a cell phone. And this device in the pockets of most people, I know in television, people tend to forget their cell phones everywhere and anywhere. I can't imagine that happening too much in the real world. It's a thing we accept in television and in movies that, oh, I forgot I left my phone there. Yeah, whatever. But this little small device has a lot of capabilities. And if you guys have ever noticed, in especially shows that involve young people, those writers will have completely incorporated these devices into that storytelling, whether it involves us being able to see their inner monologue as they attempt to write something out and then they kind of delete it and then write in something far more appropriate, whether we see them stopping in the street and receiving what would be, we see visually what in the past we would have normally seen as a phone call and them talking to someone with dialogue and then other things thereof. So they've been incorporated into storytelling. And some game masters may feel that they have a problem keeping track of not just modern technology, but high technology. And yeah, Deadman the Storyteller says Shadow Tech, a reskin or merger of Shadowrun and Battletech done as an April Fool's Day joke and released by Catalyst Game Labs. Don't do that, because that might happen. If they're watching this right now, they go, ooh, cha-ching. Yeah, Shadow Tech. Even the name sounds like something that somebody would have put out. Although I think Shadowrun has put out a Shadow Tech book, if I'm not mistaken. But Um, I think I do feel like there is a keeping track of the technology. Plura says, "I'll play it." Keeping track of the technology is much like it's not a matter of keeping track of it setting wise. Yeah, try and stop me. Yeah, right. It's not a matter of keeping track of the technology, the fluff portion of it. I'm sure it has a lot to do with the ubiquitous capabilities of the player characters. For example, you want a mystery, a murder mystery or something, and there are clues that I've got this great idea where they're not going to find the clues, and this is going to last 6 sessions. And the person goes, I'm just going to take a picture of their face and type in what their name is, or I'm going to do, it's like one of those things where a simple button press or Google search or something could uncover a lot more information than even many of us know. And again, then all of a sudden the game master's doing like the face palming because they realize that every single individual is able to, I don't know, communicate instantly, or you know get in their spaceship and leave all the death and destruction that they've caused on this planet behind, or we're just going to go through a warp hole. Oh, and the rules say we can't be tracked, so we're going to place a nuke on that planet and leave. I am not doing that. You think you can catch me? Yeah, no, 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 no. I'm not going to mention her name because she will answer. Uh, Ricker says, quote, "I'm sorry, citizen, your communication services is down." Damn. I heard you. I caught you, Palora. Um, yeah, I see it now. But it is true. There are some conveniences. For example, maybe hyperspace only works at the convenience of plot. Let's take a look at Star Wars, for example, when it comes to that. Oh, the hyperspace drive is down yet again. Darn it. you know, I, you don't really want to play that game too often, although I guess in a session 0, you could point it out and go, listen, guys, yes, you do have a spaceship, and yes, you can travel around, but you could do a session 0 of I'm gonna super hinder you when it comes to it, because that's kind of the point of having the adventures, or even be straight up about it and go, I can't keep track of all this planet hopping. Do you guys mind if I, or don't even ask, you just go, listen, this is how I'm going to work it, and if you want to play in the game, this is what's going to go on. And you go, yeah, all right, I'll do that. Rickard says, could be the plot point in and of itself if your services don't work, like especially when it comes to communication, data retrieval, and those kind of things. That very much could be a plot point. We've had data retrieval things that have been down here. Now, I'm going to mix in some of the reskin things, because some of the problems when it comes to science fiction are that this isn't a problem. Is that you'll read in the rules and you'll have like laser rifles, maybe you'll have some other kind of weapons, maybe a gyrojet pistol, maybe there's some kind of blaster rifle again, maybe something that stuns people, a couple of hand-to-hand weapons, maybe a stun baton, maybe a vibro blade, or something of that nature. And one of the things that separates, say, cyberpunk or the cyberpunk aesthetic from other things is this attachment to brands. So like the original Cyberpunk 2017 and then became Cyberpunk 2020, and of course we have the video games and such, is that brands were very much a part of the aesthetic of cyberpunk, meaning that you could have the same pistol, for example, I don't know, you grab the pistol and the pistol does 1d6 plus 1 damage or whatever. And that's not the important part. It's who designed the pistol. Was it what was it Arasaka? Was it a Smith and Wesson? Was it an HK? Which government designed it? Is it a black market modified weapon or something? And yeah, you could maybe add a couple of modifiers, plus ones or plus twos up and down, for example, off of that die 6. But it was very much a brand's fashion forward type of setting. And you could do the same things in your own world, very much so when it comes to, starships. Starships have certain names. They are, ABC class. They are alpha, beta, gamma, delta, omega class ships. They are named after famous people or locations. Oh, Deadman says it was started as 20 Cyberpunk 2013, then 2015, then 2017, and 2018. Yeah, I think my latest edition is 2020 that I still own, and I believe it went further into the future. But that's the problem with the the year, the name of the year in the intellectual property. At one point, you're going to get to that point, like books like 1984 or movies like 2012, and because when you get there, you're like, this. Your predictions were just a little bit off. I don't believe in the malls we're going to have a place where you can buy yourself a cyber arm or get yourself a cyber optic inserted, like getting a piercing. But that is part and parcel of the cyberpunk aesthetic. So yes. Rickard says, good thing they changed the cyberpunk red. We no longer have an expiration date. Yeah. Exactly, right. Someone said, let's not do that anymore. But again, I guess this isn't necessarily it is reskinning, but on the barest level where it's just renaming something. For example, what type of armor is someone wearing? What type of weapons are they using? Computer programs and things of that nature. And then by naming them, the players and the fluff in your world, the setting information can take on its own flavor. Maybe maybe the I don't know the Soyuz 87B Starcraft has its own quirks from its earthly Russian origins from the past, where they always incorporated a certain, I don't know, a cup holder for vodka or something like that, right? I'm being very, very stereotypical, but you get my point, right? There may be, maybe there's a certain armor company that says you can buy our armor in any color you want as long as it's red, Yep. Pelor says, we've already missed a date on Judgment Day, a la Terminator. We sure have. 2001: A Space Odyssey. Yep. Already passed the date by. And nope. Pelor says, Demolition Man reskinned advert jingles as pop songs. Does that count? Maybe. That's a setting fluff for like post-apocalyptic settings where commercial jingles become the new music in the future, and such. I think they even used that in a movie, Reign of Fire, where dragons caused the post-apocalypse. But I like that movie. But anyway, Rickard says, well, to be fair, we can always say that they managed to stop the Judgment Day. That is very much true. Very, very true. Now, going on to reskinning some other things, I think another thing is very common in science fiction games, as opposed to your classic medieval light, medieval-ish, medieval blanketed games, is that you tend not to have a lot of, not NPCs, but monster creature types, right? For example, Eclipse Phase tends to not have very many alien types. They have a basic, like, this is a Titan robot. This is This is an extrasent virus. This is, and you get a handful, but not as many. Usually, not very much. Maybe if they have a splat book that talks about robots or aliens or things from spawned by the elder gods or something. And mind you, many of those sci-fi tabletop RPG settings involve other things, whether it involves hacking, whether it involves a heavy dose of psychic ability, psionics. Maybe it involves going through wormholes, and you're going up against a ton of named and nameless NPCs who have similar capabilities to you. If it's cyberpunk, you're going up against other cyber individuals. If you're playing an exploration, intergalactic exploration type of game, be it Star Trek or some other version of it, you're encountering other alien species that could possibly be player characters. So you don't have a lot of that. So it's possible you're going to have to heavily reskin some of your basic, this is a template for a monstrous alien that is of a huge size. This is a basic template for a tiny alien infestation of a small size, and give it new names, give it behavioral traits, give it some kind of quirk, whether it's an alien that goes berserk because it hears things at a high frequency. Maybe it's a blind alien that uses sonar. Maybe it's an alien that lives inside of the surface of a gas giant and floats around. It comes from a heavy gravity world, so maybe it's very squat and wide, versus coming from a light gravity world where they may be very lithe, very thin and tall. Maybe they are plant-like, et cetera, using essentially your same statistics. Maybe you have a statistic for a rampaging, a mindless robot, or a humanoid robot that's a robot servant, and you might want to use that statistic for a robot soldier, a robot servant, a robot ninja or something, and just kind of change some of the skill traits, what they look like, how they operate in the world. So maybe maybe it isn't humanoid. Maybe it looks like a spider, and the PCs go to another space hab, and maybe instead of a spider, it looks like it's like a snake, and is able to go into it's purposely created to go into the heating and AC ducts, or some other kind of rationalization for why it looks like a snake, things like that. Rickard says, so instead of future movies that are alternate history telling the tale of how they saved the world, to let our world exist. Alternate history is another, like the Terminator franchise. You can also do, and something popular today, The Man in the High Castle, The Handmaid's Tale, the new Watchmen series, Westworld. There are some alternate history shows where bits and pieces of the background might show you something that is very commonly seen, such as maybe a stop sign, or the flag of your country, or a military uniform, or a sidearm carried by the authorities, and they'll change what it looks like. And then so that you realize this isn't taking place today. It's taking place today in an alternate history of today. And of course it's going in the past and going, well, if history was different, what would the world be like? And so you can then extrapolate from that point onward as to what the world would be like in terms of what's going on. So, and especially when it comes to altering, say, the country's flag, in terms is usually a dead giveaway, or altering what your money, the paper money looks like, or very much altering in movies, that what they do is they like to alter the political landscape as who is in charge, and you go, this isn't our world, this is something else. And maybe there's even something in the background that changes how we interact with things. And then in that sense, then you can reskin, because this is an alternate history, you can reskin what's going on. Um, in Terminator Genesis, they said the Judgment Day was delayed significantly, as Dead Man says. Uh, Pelora says, I saw a thing on Pinterest, being a fanatical Pinterest girl, about fantasy creatures in space. Angels having their true form as nebulae, sprites in trails of comets, etc. Yeah, and there's even someone even put into a thread in one of the Facebook groups I'm part of about radiant energy. Instead of it being quote unquote the good energy, it was more like a radiation or something. I very much find that I like the idea of full circling our tabletop RPGs, that there's always, you can go hard sci-fi, you can go eclipse phase, you can go maybe traveler or something, meaning that there isn't anything fantastical out there at all. It's all explained by science. Maybe the science doesn't exist to explain it yet, but there's nothing, you can make the claim that there isn't anything magical out there at all. But if your rule system, a la Starfinder, corresponds to Pathfinder, and you want to use any and all of the things of your Pathfinder books, a lot of your minotaurs and your harpies and your hydras and your krakens and such, then yes, there may be a possibility that many of those classic fantasy creatures and such are out there in this scientific world, that there are angels, flying around the coronas of stars and such and such. Rickard says, so on the topic of reskinning reentry, when anything re-enters the atmosphere, it creates a strong aurora effect, strong enough to light up the night sky quite a lot. Try to get back. Yeah, I thought of the reskinning reentry tag as, because when we think of reentry, whether someone's falling into the atmosphere and burning up, a space station falls out of orbit and burns up, a starcraft is going out of control, and the pilot must put the heat shields down perfectly so that the heat shields, so the craft doesn't turn over to the unheat shielded portion of the craft as well. What I was thinking of in terms of reentry was kind of what Pelora is talking about, in the sense that there something falling out of the sky and we're uncertain what it is, a comet, a meteor, some kind of device or something, and then reskinning what it is that has come into our atmosphere. So it could be, we're thinking that it's some kind of alien invasion or a warcraft that's lost its engine power and it's trying to come in on reduced power, but now there's something different about what it is, and it's our opportunity to go, oh well, I have this medieval creature. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. Well, let's go with mind flayers and illithids, right? Definitely a spelljammer kind of thing. We know them as being the humanoid form of Cthulhu-like creatures. Their mindset is bizarre and strange, and they work for or are dominated by or loyal to a fanatically devoted to this elder brain, and they're trying to assimilate other things in their world. And we can draw a lot of what we consider to be medieval creatures and just reskin them as some other alien creatures in our own world. Whether it's, let's take the Minotaur, for example. Maybe there is an alien race that, lives in they live in a hive-like community that is like a maze, right? Now, you don't have to necessarily say that they look like Minotaurs and they have some sort of relationship to what Minotaurs would be. Although you could go ancient aliens, that the Minotaur wasn't a myth at all, but was due to some sort of alien contact from ancient man. And then once humanity goes out into space, they encounter these cloven-hooved Minotaur-like beings out in space. Maybe change up their shape a little bit. Maybe they weren't horns. Maybe they were something else. Um, and so maybe those aliens came to Earth and thought that all the cows and bulls and bison and water buffaloes on our planet were the dominant species, and found out that they weren't sentient at all. And they're like, "Oh, darn it!" But but again, maybe where they live in these complex maze-like places, and to them it's no big deal. But to us, we can get confused in it, and that's just an idea of like, oh, I wonder if we can reskin something from one genre into another genre. And my idea, of course, is yeah. Ricker says, "Oh, cool idea for a setting. What if something is stuck in Reentry? Sure, it would technically work, but I'm sure the visual would look amazing." You mean? Do you mean like literally? It's in the atmosphere, like almost in like a geosynchronous orbit, but it's still burning. Like it's leaving like a burning contrail, and one end of it is like superheated, and the other end is like blasting superheated ionized air behind it, but it's still sitting there in the upper atmosphere. I like that. I like that a lot, as a matter of fact, because it would be bizarre. Because you're like, wait a minute, it should be falling, and it looks like it's falling, but it's not moving at all. Um, Maybe it's stuck in between our reality, and somehow it's whatever hyperspace warp drive, um, slipstream, interdimensional something is causing it to be stuck where it is. uh yeah, I read the reentry bit and ignored it thoroughly. Yeah, you're fine. Ricker says, so you have like a huge space station stuck in perpetual reentry with a perpetual fireball right on the underside of the station. Say that the gravity is pulling it down, but the station has enough energy to keep countering it, but the tug of war is causing the fire effect. I like that, because then you can very easily do the hazard of getting to the station. You're in the station with things maybe falling apart, burning up, the tension of moving the station out of its tenuous orbit. And then, of course, there's the tension of, uh-oh, it is literally falling out of its orbit, and then getting the hell out of there before the thing completely burns up and collapses. I like that. I like that a lot. Plura says, isn't there a book where the moon and the earth have a falling out, and the moon people just push things into Earth's gravity? Then the things obviously get fast and destructive. I don't know. I know that aspect of the um, hmm, what is it called? Um, Retrofuturism, where stories have been written where there are people who live on the moon. John Carter of Mars is an example of who's the gentleman that wrote the books? John Carter of Mars and other things. Someone, come on, dead man, you know it. Um, Edgar Rice Burroughs. Anyway, you could very much do you could combine hey, I'm doing a science fiction setting, but I'm doing it retro-futuristic, where we have people who live on Mars. They're, Martian canals have boats in them, and there are people who live there, and there are people on the moon who are trying to. Is it Edgar Rice Burroughs? Yeah, Edgar Rice Burroughs and some others from that time period. Now, I understand that the people, Edgar Rice Burroughs, the person who wrote the Conan series, the much of the Cthulhu storylines and such, a lot of them had, let's see if I can put this nicely. They had alternate social commentary as to the accepted superiority of themselves over other cultures they encountered, and put them into their books. So I get that, but it is part of our cultural zeitgeist. So I'm able to accept it for what it is at the time. Although I can say that there's a lot of problematic stuff in a number of those stories, especially when it comes to people who've supposedly are less technologically and more melanin enhanced than the people in a lot of those stories. But it was of its time. It was the age of exploration. Like, we're going to bring civilization to the savage people. Again, a lot of that, because it was in our zeitgeist, we can kind of take a hold of those kind of things and run with it. Also, yesterday we talked about um, player characters, even in a medieval setting, getting pulled into the digital brain of an ancient godling being, an AI or something like that. Again, we can reskin if you wanted to include a major portion of hacking into your world where there aren't really rules for it, or a dreamscape where there aren't really rules for it. The player characters somehow, their ship gets damaged and they get thrust into the through the tenuous skin that is protecting them from the wormhole that is, protecting them from insanity, and throwing them into a world of chaos in between, going through this hyperspatial dimension or something like that. And we definitely could have, a situation where you're like, I don't have rules for hacking really. We just have, computer programming skill, but I want to make this more dynamic. Then you could just reskin what you already have. I mean, they've done this in Dungeons and Dragons where you go, oh, guess what? We're going to substitute intelligence and wisdom as charisma instead of your physical stats for your mental stats in this dream-like scape, this astral plane or something. You can do the exact same thing in your science fiction game. Hey guys, instead of your physical stats, you've all been jacked into a machine and you're using your mental stats, and you have to succeed in navigating the computer programming of the machine to allow it to wake you up out of stasis so that you can maybe get out of the ship that's entering into reentry again, right? Maybe all the player characters are going to die from reentry, and it's, the reentry is going to take only 8 minutes long, but because you're in a digital realm and you're moving at, hyper fast speeds, it could take hours or even days, maybe even weeks to navigate relative time to get the machine to unlock the stasis chambers that all the PCs are locked in. And that in itself could be a one-off adventure when you're, the PCs are literally all plugged into machines or something temporarily. Rickard says, to be fair, there is a lot of problematic stuff in a lot of the books from ye old times. Hell yeah, there's a lot of problematic stuff. And I'm of the mind that, you don't change the past. You don't erase it. You don't change it. You don't keep it out of the public eye. You don't edit what exists. You just look at it and go, yeah, that's a problem. I'm going to take this one part because I like John Carter and I like Mars. This other part about them, the whole cultural, genetic superiority stuff, I'm going to put that aside. It's very easy to do, and those who do not learn from the past will repeat it. I don't believe in editing at all. I don't believe it exists. It is what it is. We don't need to handhold people. Part of me feels like people need to be toughened up a little bit. Ooh, Poopsmith, what's going on there? Pelora says, I'm just going to point out that when you fall into a black hole, you get spaghettified. Technical term. Yeah. I mean, it's not very difficult for us to do that. We love our Conan. We love some of those things, the intellectual properties. And sure, hell, we can go back now and take a look at some movies and television shows and go, ooh, that's a little problematic. There was a period of time in the late 70s and early 80s, there were some television shows you could never get away with today. But don't edit them. Don't do that. Don't, we're adults. We can handle it. Spaghettified. Yeah. Spaghetti. Yeah. That we love ourselves some black holes because it represents the unknown. And yes, black holes. Thanks, poop. Whatever. But you know, in reality, would we get extruded into a thin paste of eventually decomposing, molecular parts? Yes. Is that something we can gamify? No. We love the idea that, oh, it's the outer skin of a black hole. Let's go through it to another dimension, or let's harness it for power, or let's use it as a existential weapon against our enemies, or something like that. So, yeah, definitely the scientific portions of it, while amazing, and if you're an Isaac Arthur um, fan, you love all the things he has to say. But part of it is kind of like, splashing cold water on your very hot, fantastical excitement, right? Sometimes you got to take a cold shower and go, yeah, that wouldn't really happen in science, scientifically. Oh man. Poop says, on this subject, mockery is also a good way to handle problematic content. Tales from the Floating Vagabond handle Nazis in a funny way. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, it's that kind of stuff where where doing the mockumentary kind of thing with it absolutely works as well. I know some people get triggered just by, don't even mention the word. You're just like, okay, context has a lot to do with it. Has a ton to do with problematic elements. And so, yeah, hell, we've got a television show called Man in the High Castle. I think it's on Amazon, and it definitely deals with problematic issues in a alternate history kind of thing. And so, why the hell not? And then, of course, we are creative people. We can reskin the just like Man in a High Castle. It's like, what if, and then you fill in a blank, dot 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 dot. Well, what if the United States was never colonized by outsiders, and the indigenous peoples begin to sail around the world? And you could extrapolate that to any culture around the world. What if the Japanese became, a great naval nation, and decided to spread the ancient Japanese and samurai culture around the world or something? What if the American cowboy never made it past the Mississippi or something? What if? And we can have a ton of fun with that, and especially if it means kind of rethinking what it is that meaning like, uh, it's a possibility that we can reskin some of the elements in our science fiction so that we can incorporate some other elements, meaning you come across a more primitive race, but you don't have any rules for it in your science fiction game. Okay, I'm going to reskin some of our science, like our Kevlar armor. I'm just going to make it a tribal armor. You can reskin back down the other way. I'm going to reskin our monoblade, and they just have very sharp blades carved from the bones of these plains running beasts that they ride on the back of, or something. Just like reskinning our Dungeons and Dragons, and go, oh, I'm going to just, instead of calling it a crossbow, I'll call it a firearm. Instead of calling it plate mail, I'm going to call it power armor or something. And of course, you're going to have the individuals who are going to say, well, firearms are so much more powerful than ancient weapons. That doesn't make any sense. And you can say, well, there is a period in history where firearms are far more powerful, but in my world, it hasn't gotten there yet. It took a couple hundred years for that to happen. So we're playing in that couple of 100-year period of time, right? Rickard says, I think it's one thing about ye old books. Need a t-shirt that says that. You can buy the book without giving money to an author that is alive and still believes in those problematic things. Yes. Now, maybe I'm a hypocrite, and I will admit that maybe I am hypocritical. That if the author's dead and gone and passed, and quite a few generations have gone on and maybe the estate is still around, I kind of make a difference between a historical book with references of that nature. Let's take Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn or whatever, versus an individual who has those kind of beliefs and is still alive and making money off of it. Maybe I'm a hypocrite that I would buy a book about Conan, but not pay for a book who is producing a book today that has those thoughts. Although, then you get into the issue of, let's say there's 30 creators and one of them is an a-hole. Do you not buy the creative thing because 29 of them are pretty good people, but one of them is an a-hole? I mean, if you on the Venn diagram of a-holes versus nice people, you're going to have an overlap of the a-holes of the world in everything. So it's kind of like hating on a movie when 5,000 people made a movie and this one dude was like, you know, a criminal, a sexual pervert, some kind of pedophile or racist or whatever, right? Some drug-addled, power-hungry, you know, director or something, and it's like, well, do you hate The Usual Suspects because Kevin Spacey was in it, because he's allegedly grabbing the genitalia of young people on set? There were other people in the movie too. There's other people behind the scenes. So yeah, I maybe I'm hypocritical in that way, but I don't know. I could change my mind easily. Ricker says, firearm. I'll take my heavy crossbow. At least I might be able to hit what I'm aiming for. Yeah, there was a long history of firearms being extremely inaccurate for a long time, and took far longer to reload. Right, a lot of misfires, a lot of humidity and moisture killed them. A hell of a lot of steps to reload. Okay, let's see, I've got to look down the barrel and pour the powder and then take the ball and put it, and then take the packet down and all that. Yeah. There was a period of time where firearms were not very good. It was better to pick up a bow or a crossbow, or hell, throw a dagger. You might be more accurate than that. Scott says, I thought firearms just rendered plate mail obsolete. Eventually it did, but remember, early firearms weren't that good. It took a while, and I think this is our intellectual. We are too smart for our own good, because we're automatically fast forwarding to a point where we're like, well, there was bow and arrows and swords and plate mail, and then there were firearms. So that meant one made the other obsolete overnight, and that wasn't the case when it comes to firearms. Now, mind you, I'm not advocating including firearms in your medieval world. I'm also not advocating not including them. I'm saying that there were quite a few hundred years where you could make the case that firearms and medieval weaponry were in a state of equilibrium because of their effectiveness, right? A firearm could punch through plate mail when it hit, and it was less about it rendering plate mail obsolete. It was more about being able to train commoners, training commoners to be using bows, training commoners to use crossbows, and eventually training a shit ton of commoners to use firearms made them far more effective, which is why they were so damn inaccurate that you needed, a couple hundred people firing all at the same time to hit anything. And Ricker says, same here. This is why I'm okay with buying Lovecraft compilations, but won't buy Ender's Game. Yeah, if someone said to me, DBJ, you're wrong, I wouldn't argue with them. Like someone would say, I'm not buying any of that stuff, old or new. And yeah, although I think the older stuff is free, is public domain now. The Cthulhu stuff, I believe, is public domain, so I guess you're not really buying it. So I suppose to alleviate the guilt and the anger, you could make money off of something by getting it for free today. So I suppose that's a that's a thing. um, um, Barfrin says, like Wagner, people love the Ride of the Valkyrie, but he was an anti-Semite. Exactly. Or Henry Ford, a Nazi supporter, but was instrumental in building the car industry. Um, that is Chaosium now. They defend it hardcore. I don't think it needs to. That's another thing. I don't think it needs defending. I think it is what it is. Right. Call of Cthulhu is a game setting that is what it is, and Chaosium is not supporting it. And again, you know, like Henry Ford, right? Even if as a Nazi supporter, a lot of these men of industry were pretty damn brutal, right? The people, they didn't pay people fair wages and give them vacation time. Oh, and here's some healthcare to pick from, and here's it wasn't until other people created unions to say, you know what, maybe you shouldn't be employing 8-year-olds in your factories, right? So we yeah, it's, again, let's not delete history, but because we are talking about tabletop RPGs, we can definitely reskin our history, right? Uh Pillar says, I read Ender's Game, but I didn't go and see the film. I found out about the dubious things between those two things. Yeah. Again, you're going to find that with a lot of people. What the If it wasn't for our desire for knowledge, we probably would have never found out about these things, about these creators in the first place. Whether it's, Tolkien, who hated the hippies that loved his books, whether it's a bunch of these other writers. So Deadman says, depends on the age of the firearm. Modern firearms would make it obsolete, but older black powder firearms would just bounce off. Right. That's my whole point. We didn't advance from knights to AK-47s. There's quite a few hundred years in between when there were fits and starts, and even before there were revolvers, there were flintlocks, and before flintlocks there were these other, I don't know what type of firearm was that, where you had you set fire on the top of the rifle and you put the powder there and it lit on fire. Then you had the wick that would hit it, and then you had to wait till it ignited and stuff. I mean, yeah, yeah. Knights with AK-47s. Yeah. Was it the Arquebus? Is that the name of it? The matchlock? Yeah. If you take I'm sure you can do some Google foo and you'll find early firearms and their fits and starts, and that kind of thing. Is it matchlock? Yeah, the matchlock firearms, where they literally had to light it on fire. You aimed it and you had to wait for it to catch on fire, much like lighting a piece of dynamite or something before it fired the bolt. Yeah, but now we're, as usual, we diverge off of here. We're talking about science fiction and reskinning the things we have in our games and such. When it comes to, excuse me, another thing when it comes to the tabletop RPGs, whether it's whether you're doing intergalactic investigations, whether you're playing like you're playing like a Warhammer. Well, Warhammer kind of fits into it. Whether you're playing like a Warhammer, whether you're playing Rickard says, I'm a bit sad that Orson Scott Card was responsible for the insult sword fighting in Monkey Island, though it is a genius idea, and wonder how you could make it into a tabletop RPG mechanic. I'm not familiar with that. The Deadman puts in the arquebus into the Discord chat. Yeah, I mean, there were so many types of early firearms that I feel like you could make it would it would behoove you that if you wanted to include them, say, in your Dungeons and Dragons, but you still wanted to include some kind of technological advancement into your world, that for the most part, we don't role play 800 years of society, right? We normally are like, okay, my character exists and we play in the world in which my character exists. So could you reskin a crossbow as a firearm and just call it what it is, without changing the rules? I think you could. I think you could reskin advancements in armor, armor protection. You could reskin if you wanted to. You're like, the only game I own is 5th edition, and I don't want to buy Starfinder, but I want to make it into a science fiction game. I think you could very much say, well, instead of a material shield, it's a force shield that gives you +2 armor class. Why not? No problem with that. Also, if you whatever game you're playing or rules you're using, when you have Star Wars D20 was a thing, and we talked about this before, where we mentioned adding magic where there isn't any and removing magic where there is some. You could do the same thing for science fiction. So, for example, if, let's say, you wanted to include some form of cybernetic enhancement, but the rules you're using for your science fiction doesn't include any cybernetic enhancement, you could then say, well, your character somehow gets a +2 to their strength. How do you describe the +2 to their strength? Is it described because your character has been working out? Are you getting stronger? Or is it from nanotech fibers that's, put carbon fiber into your muscle? Is it because you now have a +2 to your strength because your character now has a new cybernetic arm, and that's how you describe it? Is it because you've been infected by some kind of alien biotech that has turned your skin green, and you have like red veins popping out of your muscles because you're all roided out or something? You could very much reskin the benefits and bonuses in your game and just say at the table, hey guys, listen, if your skill bonus is above a +5, please describe anything that's +5 or better is something that is extraordinary. Tell me why it's extraordinary. Do you have some kind of latent psychic ability to predict, when when an enemy is firing at you, and that's why your character has such high reflexes and perception? Is it because your added endurance is because you have a secondary or tertiary heart somewhere else in your body? You have a backup brain or something that keeps you from dying? Like, you have extra hit points because you have nano machines that help stitch your body together? Like, you could create extraordinary elements where there are none specifically. And then Barford says, or you had to lop off had to lop your arm off due to a partial possession and had to rebuild an arm out of available parts. Yeah. um we can narratively, we if you're willing to suspend the separation between narrative and game mechanics, you can go pretty deep and dark and bizarre and gonzo. I haven't used the word gonzo in a while. I used to do that all the time. You could go very gonzo with it if you're willing to accept the fact that my character suffered 18 points of damage, and now at the end of the fight, I heal my 18 points of damage. If you've described it as, oh, Rickard says, oh, snap, a daemon, a demon, a technological demon, possession of your cybernetic parts. Yeah, if you can, it's pronounced demon, I get it, but I like pronouncing it daemon, as in just the way the DAE as opposed to the DE by itself. Yeah, a technological virus could be a reskin of a being possessed by, say, a ghost or something. I believe in the Harbinger setting created by the Absolute Tabletop guys, they have a high-tech setting called Harbinger where they've reskinned 5th edition, and that a ghost is actually a computer program of the residual elements of a real living person put into a computer program. And a daemon, for computing purposes, is a multitasking computer operating system that runs as a background process rather than being under the direct control of an interactive user. Sounds like possession to me. I gotta see that visual. There's got to be a GIF of that. Pelor says it starts downloading porn to your arm. Hilarity ensues. For for others, although maybe that individual might be having themselves some enjoyment temporarily, unless they're into that kind of thing. Oh, stop spraying on me! Whoa, stop spraying on me! Rika says worse when they download porn to your vocal mods. Ooh, yeah. Yeah. What's the eclipse phase thing where you're projected into your digital overlay? You get to overlay things into your visual spectrum. You could very much walk around like that. Like, why are you always excited? It's like, oh yeah, I'm wearing my VR goggles, and everything I see is, oh yeah, bucka wow, wow. Oh, you guys are bad. Oh man. Yeah, there's got to be a gif of the cybernetic arm that's just going out of control because they're like I don't know, their Pornhub subscription or something. Oh man, but again, we can even, if we want to, if especially if it doesn't exist, you could very much reskin, like okay, instead of the Millennium Falcon, it's a biological, an alien race uses biological creatures that are able to transverse the deepest of deep spaces. It's like the living starship idea, that the living starship oh man. Arnie, why are you headed to the bathroom? I'll be back. All right, baby.
Bye, baby. I love you.
Love you. Oh man, we have the signaled salutation that we've hit the hour mark. Guys, thank you so much for being absurdist in this episode. I want to let you guys know that slowly and surely, very old episodes are being yeah. Comes back as Arnie's cybernet. Yeah, we're all terrible people. Hey, you started it, Pelora. You're bad, Pelora, bad. But cybernetic arm comes back with all this like what is that? Is that mucus? What is that? Is that ooze? Don't worry about it. Yes, the Herald of the Hour mark has spoken. I need to come up with a name for my wife. Like, she is her who has ended the hour. Dead Man the Storyteller says the Neo-Anarchist Guide to Real Life was a fan-made supplement for Shadow on 1st edition and later 2nd edition. No. Are you serious? Stop it. She who brings the end of streams. I think that's kind of dirty too. I'm gonna make a t-shirt out of that. Anyway, guys, thank you very much. I just want to let you guys know that the older episodes, we go back probably yes, She Who Heralds the End. Yeah. End or end streams, right? Harbinger of the End. Thank you, guys. But no, in all seriousness, Pelora, have a good one. You guys, we go back a year doing these things Monday through Friday. They are becoming a podcast, unedited, whatever the case may be. They're being uploaded to SoundCloud. There are a ton of past episodes, and we will eventually catch up to modern day, but it will take quite a bit. I'm not going to upload all 350 odd plus videos, but into SoundCloud as audio format. But for someone who's like, I'd like to listen in, but I really don't want to burn up my I really don't want to burn up my my data, or maybe you're just an audio individual in your audio file. Go to SoundCloud. So this show is now a podcast. Understanding that our discussion right now will eventually be a podcast in the future. So I'm blaming all you guys. So listen, I watched that show when it came on the air. put posting in a gif of the Bionic Man. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for participating in RPG with DBJ. You guys make this show what it is. Well, I guess I could be here without you, but why would I? I mean, what would be the point of that?